This lesson, I think, will be particularly interesting because it will equip us with enough now to start building basic sentences. Why is this enclitic pronoun so important for building a basic sentence? We'll see in a bit. If you remember from last week, we looked at personal pronouns. Just a quick refresher, a personal pronoun are the pronouns we normally think of when we use the word pronoun. So, for instance, I, you, he, she, they, and the like. In Syriac, we have the different um, gender categories of pronouns, a bit different from English, as we saw last week. So, for instance, there's a difference between the second person masculine and second person feminine, as well as third masculine plural and third feminine plural. So in English, right, we just say they. But in Syriac, there's Hanun and Hanan. Similarly, in English, we just say you. But in Syriac, there's a difference between you, masculine singular, you, masculine plural, you, feminine singular, and you, feminine plural. So it's important to have these personal pronouns down pretty well. So those are the personal pronouns that we covered last week. What are enclitics? Well, from the chart that we just saw, we know eno is I. An enclitic is a shortened form of the pronoun and it becomes predicative. What does that mean? Predicative is something like a verb. So the enclitic is like a verbal form of the pronoun. So if eno is I, no, when you add it to a phrase, is I am. That's it. I am. And each of the pronouns have some enclitic form to function as a pronoun plus the verb to be. So an example of this is malkono. Malkono. What does that mean? I am a king or I am the king. In Syriac, as you've noticed so far, we don't have articles. There are no definite articles. So you have to judge by context whether something is a the or a. So whether something is specific or indefinite. Here, I could be saying, I am the king, and you might add something to clarify that. So I might say, I am the king of the city, but it could still be indefinite. So I could be a king of a city. It really depends on the context. But the important thing here is the enclitic gives us this ability to form basic phrases because it acts as the verb to be. So as I mentioned, the pronouns have their own form of enclitic, and it's helpful to keep in mind the personal pronouns when trying to learn the enclitic pronouns, because in fact, they're mostly just pronouns, the personal pronouns, with a letter that's been silenced. The exception is the third masculine plural and the third feminine plural. But let's just run through them all, starting with first person singular. So, no, we saw this example. Malkono, I'm king. An example of that hopefully makes this idea of enclitic clear. Then, moving to first person plural, nan. As you see, second masculine singular and plural, and second feminine singular and plural do not have a proper enclitic because you just use the pronoun. So that makes life easier because there's nothing to learn there. You just use the pronoun. With third masculine singular, we see a wow, and third feminine singular, you see a yod after silent haze. I will explain in just a bit why there is no vowel, but pay attention, because if there's no vowel, you can't pronounce it as it is. And there are a couple rules I need to give you to enable you to pronounce the enclitic for the third masculine and feminine singular. And then for the third masculine plural and third feminine plural, so they are, we see enun and enen. So the he in third plural gets replaced by olaf. And as I mentioned, it's helpful to compare the personal pronouns and the enclitic pronouns. It will help you memorize and learn the enclitic because, in fact, the enclitic is not something wholly new. The enclitic is just a shortened form. That's what an enclitic means, a shortened form of the pronoun. So, for instance, both the first singular and first plural just silence a letter. And the same thing with third masculine singular and third feminine singular. The only one that's a bit different is third masculine plural and third feminine plural. And the only thing that happens there is he becomes an olaf, as we already saw. Just to run through the meanings to make this absolutely clear, because sometimes it can be confusing hearing third common singular, third common plural, whatever. So, first common singular eno, I. First common plural hnan, we. Second masculine singular at, you. Second masculine plural atun, you. Second feminine singular at, you. Second feminine plural aten, you. Third masculine singular hu, he. Third masculine plural henun, they. Third feminine singular he, she. And third feminine plural henen, they. So those are the personal pronouns. And now the enclitics, which, keep in mind, this is just theoretical to say them by themselves because they always have to be attached to something. First singular, no. First plural, nan. Third masculine singular, can't pronounce it as it is. As well as the third feminine singular, can't pronounce it as it is. Third masculine plural, enun, they are. And third feminine plural, enen, they are. So here's an example of that first plural. Morunoye nan. Morunoye nan. And you can maybe guess what this means. We are Maronites. So you have morunoye, Maronites, and nan, the enclitic for the first person plural. We are Maronites. And you notice that the noun comes first and the enclitic comes after it. What's important also to remember in Syriac is there has to be agreement. So here you see that the noun is plural, and so the enclitic pronoun also has to be plural. With the second person, as I mentioned, You don't need to learn anything new because it's just the personal pronoun that you use. And it's actually really useful because you can put it before or after, and it doesn't make a difference. So, for instance, on the top, you see at Qadisho, you are holy, or you are a saint, or you are the Holy One. It could mean any of those things because, again, we don't have an article. But you see, the pronoun is placed before. On the bottom, we have Qadishoto aten. Qadishoto aten. You, feminine plural, are holy ones or saints. What's important here to observe is that the position of the pronoun doesn't matter for second person. You can put it before or after. But what is important to notice is that the noun has to agree with the pronoun. So we haven't done nouns yet, of course, and this will be next week. But just conceptually to keep in mind, the top noun is masculine singular, so the pronoun has to be masculine singular. The bottom is feminine plural, and so the pronoun has to be feminine plural. And of course, the person, that is in this case second person, you, depends on what you're trying to communicate. So you could say, at Qadisho, you are holy. Or I could say, Qadisho no, I am holy. Or I could say, he is holy as well. That depends on what I'm trying to communicate. But the number and gender of the pronoun must agree with the noun's gender and number. And here is just another example of what I described. Qadishoto enen. So if we remember, enen is the enclitic for third feminine plural. Qadishoto is feminine plural, saints or holy ones or holy. So they, feminine plural, are holy ones, holy women. And you see here, because it's the third person, it has to be after the noun. Only second person gets to be put before or after because it's not an enclitic. First and third person have to come after the noun. So if you remember, I said we couldn't pronounce the third person in the chart because they didn't have a vowel. Now I will explain those rules to you. So we're going to take the noun malko, king, as an example. And I want to say he is the king. So I put malko, and then I put the third person enclitic after, which is the he with mbatlono underneath, and then the wow. So how do I pronounce it? Well, if you add the third person singular, masculine or feminine enclitic, there's a rule that you have to look at to know how you put the diacritic to pronounce it. So in this case, malko ends in a vowel. We see that there's a scofo over the cough, the O sound. It's a vowel. So what you do is you change that vowel in the case of third masculine singular to ftoho, to the A sound. Ah. So it becomes malkau. And as you see in the second line, I've written it that way, malkau. Now, the third line shows sometimes you just get rid of the hey completely and you attach it to the word. That's kind of rare, but I'm just showing you in case you ever encounter it and it's not something completely surprising. You'll usually see it as the second line, malkau. So the he is still there, but it's silent. What's important to understand is that the second and the third line, there's no difference in pronunciation. It's just maybe a bit simplified in the third, but it is rare to see. The third feminine singular enclitic is similar to the third masculine singular enclitic in that you can't pronounce it by itself. But it's even easier to attach to a noun that ends in a vowel because you don't have to change anything, because as we've seen, yod can be consonantal. So for instance, let's take malkto as the feminine example. So malkto here is queen, and maybe you'll start to see a pattern even before we get to nouns next week that Malko is king and Malkto is queen. So start to recognize patterns in Syriac because it will be very helpful for you because Syriac is a very regular language. And if you add the third feminine singular enclitic, it becomes Melktoi. Melktoi. She is the queen, or she is a queen. Melktoi. Now, it's a bit different if the word does not end in a vowel. If the word does not end in a vowel, you have to apply a different diacritic. Let's take diloch as our example. And we saw this already, actually. Last week, when we read Abund Bishmael, we saw this example. So diloch is yours or your. And so we want to add the third feminine singular enclitic. And so we add to the consonant, because this word does not end in a vowel, ends in a consonant, we add hboso. So it becomes dilochi, dilochi. So when the word does not end in a vowel, it ends in a consonant, you add the E for the third feminine singular. And we can take diloch as an example also for using the third masculine singular. And so when you attach the third masculine singular enclitic to a word that ends in a consonant, you add a soso. So it becomes dilochu, dilochu. Now, we learned hono, this, last week. And this is a very neat contraction that we see in Syriac that's very useful as well. And it's made using an enclitic. So hono, this, plus the third masculine singular enclitic, we get honau. So if we have this and we add the enclitic, which you remember is sort of like the verb to be, put it together, it means this is. So if you say honau malko, this is the king, or this is a king. Again, remember, it depends on context because we don't have articles in Syriac. But this is a very useful contraction because, again, it will help you start to build basic sentences. Honau malko, this is a king. And hode, the feminine demonstrative pronoun, this, does the same thing with its corresponding enclitic. So hodoi, hodoi, hodoi malkto. This is a queen. What I'm about to show you are rarer, but they appear, and it's good to be aware of them. But they don't require any special memorization. So on the top line, we see enono. Enono, you might have seen, in fact, in the Qurbono book that we use in the Maronite Church. And you can probably start to parse what it is. So, eno is the personal pronoun I, and no is the enclitic pronoun I am. So, if you put these together, it really doesn't mean anything special. I am. Why do we see enono sometimes instead of just maybe the enclitic no at the end? Well, perhaps for two reasons. First of all, enono you can put at the beginning of a sentence, and so it really emphasizes that the subject is I. I am. Secondly, if you're writing a hymn and you need 3 syllables, enono gives you 3 syllables. It doesn't really have any special semantic value. Perhaps it's more literary, but really it's nothing to be daunted by. I am, that's what it means. And similarly, atu, atu, think about it. Try to break this apart. What does that look like to you? Atu, atu. So it's at the masculine singular second person, you, plus the third masculine singular enclitic. And it just means you are. You are. And then these are 2 more. They're rarer than the preceding 2. He ye, which means that is, or she is. And it's the third feminine singular personal pronoun plus the corresponding enclitic. And then huyu, which is the third masculine singular personal pronoun plus the third masculine singular enclitic, which also means that is or he is. These are nothing to be, once again, discouraged by. These are just some rare forms that don't necessarily require memorization, but it's good to be aware of them.